Hello, today we're going to talk about religious development throughout the lifespan, focusing on childhood and adolescence. In your reading, you will have the opportunity to learn about a couple of different uh, theories about religious development in children and look at some research based on those theories. So, if you are a parent or spend any time around children, you've probably noticed how they think about religious and spiritual matters and how that changes as they develop. It's a really fascinating process to observe. And of course, you can have a positive influence on that process. For young children, religion is largely imitative in nature. That is, children tend to observe the people around them and do what they do. And beliefs are held uncritically in young children. There's little concern in the part of a child about consistency between beliefs, practice, and effects of religion. Children are first trained to follow a religious practice rather than to choose and internalize a belief, like going to Sunday school, going to church, saying your prayers at night, reading Bible stories, going to vacation Bible school, for those children who have those opportunities. As children grow older, of course, their cognitive abilities increase. And also their social environments will prompt questions that eventually move them to a deeper and more abstract level of questioning about religion. And through this process, older children will develop a deeper understanding of their faith. Whether or not the child retains the religion of his or her upbringing, if they, of course, were exposed to religion, depends on the inner choices the child makes as they grow up and the perceived value and rationale for their religion. Paluzian, in his book, does a nice job of discussing religious development in children. And most of my ideas in this lecture video come from his book and his excellent description of some of the major approaches that have been taken in coming to develop a better understanding of religious development in children. So I thought we might talk a little bit about three areas of psychological research that helps us to better understand religious development in children. One of these is the work on cognitive development, especially the work of Piaget. The second is the work on attachment, especially the work of Kirkpatrick. And then work on moral development, especially the work of Kohlberg. If you've taken general psychology or developmental psychology, you're familiar with Piaget's theory of cognitive development. You may recall that he has 4 stages of cognitive development. And as children progress through these stages, they gradually develop the ability first to think in a more logical way and then in a more abstract way. This theory takes us up through adolescence. And we can see these same kinds of changes occurring in the way that children think about religion, going from, in the beginning, a rather magical, intuitive way of thinking about religion to eventually coming to understand it in a more logical way, and then ultimately in a more abstract way. And how a child develops an understanding of and relationship with God is a great example of this. Young children tend to think in very concrete terms, and for them, religious words represent concrete entities. Like God equals a big person. God the Father is an oversized, more powerful father, similar to the child's father. A young child may think of God as a big old man in the sky, for example. And when we get into, say, kindergarten through the third grade, around in there, children begin to ask interesting questions about God. Does God die like everybody else? How does God pick up people that are dead? How did God make himself? Is God married? How old is God? How did God get up in the sky? In Lucian's chapter on religious development in children, he excerpts a couple of statements made by children in their letters to God that were taken from the book Dear God, Children's Letters to God by Heller, Heller. I have his book and I enjoy putting it out and reading these letters from time to time. They always put me in a great mood. So I'd like to read a few of them to you. Dear God, you're my favorite God. I don't have anybody before you. I praise you a lot. I hope you will write me back and think of me always. Call me if you want. Love, Jerry, age 9. Dear God, I love you. I just want to let you know ahead of time that I'd like to be there with you in heaven. Love always, Sarah, age 8. Dear nice God, I feel close to you. Like you and I are part of the same family. Maybe we could get married and make it easier. Your lover, Tina, age 7. Dear God, Father of Jesus, how does it feel to be the biggest, best dad in the whole United States? You must make out okay on Father's Day. Bruce, age 10. Dear God, my grandma died a year ago. My mom says she is with you. Could you give her this letter? Here is the letter. Grandma, I'm doing good in school, and I met a boy I'm going to marry. And one more. Dear God, thank you for my parents, my sister Anita, and for my grandma and grandpa. They are all real warm and special. I forgive you for my brother Phil. I guess you didn't finish working on him. Sean, age 12. As children get older, they tend to move from thinking about God in concrete ways to thinking about Him in more abstract ways. This is, of course, true for most adolescents and for us as adults. And adolescents often struggle with some of the same ultimate issues in life that we struggle with about the meaning of life, why bad things happen to good people, that sort of thing. And they develop a more personal and a deeper relationship with God that hopefully will continue on into their adulthood. Uh, Verbal symbols and visual symbols also carry different meanings for children than they do for adolescents and also, of course, for adults. For example, a young child probably has little response to a cross or religious art, but as children grow older, they come to understand what these symbols represent and think of them in abstract ways and develop an appreciation for the sacred in their lives. Of course, families also exert a strong influence on a child's religious development. And if a child has a good fortune of growing up in a Christian home where they have the opportunity not only to learn about their religion, but also see it carried out daily in a healthy way in the lives of their parents, they benefit even more so. Thinking about this from a psychological perspective, we could appreciate how learning theory comes into play, especially when we look at how the process of modeling takes place, and children tend to imitate their parents' behavior and the behavior of others as it relates to religious practices, and also reinforcement in what is encouraged or discouraged in the child's behavior. In addition, attachment processes also influence religious development in children and can easily carry on over into their adulthood in how they understand their relationship with God in particular. We have looked at this topic already in our course when we considered how if someone has an insecure attachment growing up, an insecure attachment with their parental caregivers, they may be even more likely to have a religious conversion experience later on as they search for a different kind of parent in their lives, and God comes to fill that role for them. Remember one case we looked at of a woman who had a father who was rather critical of her, and she grew up in a church where she learned a more punitive view of God, and eventually she changed churches and came to understand God in a different light, seeing God as more loving and more more grace-filled and developed a different kind of relationship with God that helped fill a void in her life because of the nature of the unhealthy relationship she had had with her father for many years. God is often viewed as the ideal attachment figure. God is said to be like the perfect parent, who either literally or spiritually is always there to provide us a sense of security and protect us from danger. So as we can see in our discussion so far, there are a combination of factors that come together to influence how the child's religious orientation develops: cognitive, learning, attachment, social influences from the family and other people. All of these influence how a child develops religiously. And we also know from earlier examples we've considered that when we reach adulthood, if these religious seeds are sown in our youth, even if we fall away from it, during a time of crisis, we may turn back to religion and draw on those earlier experiences in a positive way to help us cope with adversity in our lives. Then finally, I just wanted to mention the influence of moral development on children and how that can influence their religious development as well. So Lawrence Kohlberg is one person who's well known for his research on moral development in children. You may be familiar with his model of moral development already, but he has 6 stages that cover what he calls 3 levels of moral development. And just in the way of a summary, what he's getting at here is that young children's moral decisions are based more on the consequences of their actions, whether they get caught or not, whether there's something in it for them. As children grow up, they become more concerned about what other people are going to think about their behavior and also about following the rules. And of course, that we as adults, our understanding of the rules, the law, what the Bible teaches, those kinds of things, hopefully influence our understanding of right and wrong and our moral decision making. But Kohlberg also emphasized that there's a higher level of moral reasoning, and we can appreciate how a person's religious orientation to life could enter into this higher level of moral reasoning, because Kohlberg said that when we reach this higher level, then we develop our own principles of what is right based on our own understanding of the moral way to conduct our lives. And that may be consistent with the law, or it may be discrepant with the law in some situations. And we may be willing to take a stand, say on issues that we believe are wrong and need to change, even if the law is on the side of those people who would disagree with us. An example of that would be the civil rights movement in the mid part of the 20th century. People were willing to break laws and even go to jail and suffer other consequences because they knew that the laws at that time were wrong. And eventually, some of those laws changed. So someone functioning at that level, say like Martin Luther King Jr., for example, would be willing to break the law and suffer the consequences in order to hopefully change it, because of being guided by higher principles of moral justice. And then for Kohlberg, the highest level is when we have standards of morality that we consider universal, that apply across people and situations, and we are willing to stand up for those principles and appreciate that we have a responsibility not only to ourselves but to all of humanity. Let's take, for example, that a person believes in the sanctity of life. They are going to hold to that principle regardless of what the laws say in the country in which they live, the state in which they reside, if they are truly committed to this principle of the sanctity of life. And when people function at this higher level of moral reasoning, they're also able to more easily take the perspective of other people and appreciate that their moral decision making has consequences not only for the person, but for other people they know, and even other people they don't know. And in a sense, all of humanity. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about here. I have a friend who strongly believes in the sanctity of life. This individual has a strong religious orientation to her life, and she carries a card in her wallet that says, "If I am ever murdered, I do not want the person who murders me to get the death penalty." Now, that's a pretty amazing act to carry a card around that in your wallet. But she's making a statement there about how important the sanctity of life is to her. So I'd like to ask you to think about for yourself your own sense of right and wrong, and how that fits into your own religious orienting system. And that helps us to have some appreciation for the role of moral development in how our religious orientation to life also develops. Thank you.